and we're back with yet another Mission Impossible episode review. This time we have Season 4, Episode 26, the final episode, which is called The Martyr. So Jim hops into an odd-looking knick-knack store for instructions this time. The mission is a bit odd. Premier Anton Rozak of Corinthia and his sidekick Cherney are planning to use a youth conference, a congress I guess they're calling it, for their own propaganda. And the IMF must expose them. Weird mission. Anyway, we immediately head to Corinthia, where we see student protests in the streets. And Rozak and Cherney worry about the tremendous numbers of students that are out there. And Rozak specifically worries that many of the students praise the previous Democratic leader Edward Malik instead of him, and warns Cherney his continued existence depends on eradicating Malik's memory. Jim visits a Dr. Valari, who's apparently part of the team, who puts a tiny implant in his ear, and Paris puts him under hypnosis to respond only to Barney when he will be questioned later. Barney meets with another apparent part of the team, a singer named Roxy, who tells him that Edward Malik's widow is in a mental hospital on Rozak's orders, even though there's nothing wrong with her. Barney shoots a coded message to her through her open window, which she decodes and then burns. Jim goes to a bookstore and asks for Malik's autobiography, which he is told is banned, but asks the owner if he can find a copy for his special friends, which he does, and then Jim goes through spy speak to confirm that he's an agent. Jim tells the owner, Vaclav, that his orders are to kidnap a student named Peter Mueller and get him out of the country, and asks him to get another message to Madame Malik. Vaclav turns out to be a double agent, Jim knows this, and immediately takes a message to Rozak and Cherney, which indicates that Edward and Maria's son, Peter Malik, is still alive. The three of them immediately discern that Peter Mueller must be Peter Malik, and doesn't know that, despite everyone believing that Peter died during the revolution. Rozak wisely wonders why the Americans want Peter out of the picture when he could be a very useful tool for them, and decides to take a wait-and-see approach. They'll watch Peter and pass the information on to Madame Malik to see what she does. When Jim returns to Vaclav's place, he finds Cherney there and is predictably taken into custody. That evening, there's a totally groovy party for some of the students, and it's like far out, man. We find Barney, Roxy, Guard Willie, Paris, and Rozak there, and Roxy sings The Times They Are A-Changin' in an interesting use of television minutes. The song is dedicated to Rozak. Take that for what you will. Rozak meets an admiring Paris, who tells him that Rozak has many more supporters amongst the youth than he thinks, and he feels very at home in the country of Corinthia. Paris also has unflattering things to say about Edward Malik, seems really unimpressed with Roxy's singing, and heckles her when she starts to sing a peace song, lambasting U.S. hypocrisy. Barney tells him to settle down, and they stage a fight with Barney decking Paris and Willie taking him away. Cherney questions Jim in Rozak's office, but gets nowhere until Vaclav is brought into the room, at which point Jim admits that many years ago he got Peter secretly out of the country. Cherney wants to use Peter to denounce Edward Malik, but Rozak still wants to be sure that it's not a trap, and asks to look through the Malik files, but since they're so old, there isn't really any information that will help. Willie brings Barney to the nearby detention area and lets him keep a copy of Rozak's book, which contains thermite to break out of the cell. Barney walks along precarious ledges and climbs to get into a professor's office, where Jim will be taken to be given truth serum for information. He places a transmitter in the room just as Rozak calls the professor to get him ready, but Barney is able to hide and then escape. On the way back to his cell, food comes for him, and he's able to get back just in time for the guard to bring it into him and not notice that he was gone for a while. Once the guard is out, Barney hooks up his relay to the transmitter so he can talk to Jim to respond to the professor's questions. He confirms to Rozak and Cherney the story of how he took Peter to Zurich, and the guard returns to the room, forcing Barney to put the transmitter away, and Jim goes silent. Fortunately, the guard leaves fairly quickly, and Barney is able to resume Jim's speech, saying that he didn't want Rozak to be able to use Peter for his own ends, and that's why he hid the knowledge of Peter's identity. Willie retrieves Barney once the work is done. Rozak plays the tape to Paris, who has befuddled at the revelation, but says it doesn't matter to him. He still doesn't agree with Malik's Western ideals, and the fact that Maria Malik is still alive is irrelevant to him too. Rojak asks him to make a speech at the closing ceremonies of the student event, and he reluctantly agrees if Kearney will help him with what to say. The announcement is heard on the radio all over the country. Rojak gets a call from a country doctor who claims that he has evidence that Peter is dead. It turns out to be Dr. Villari, who shows Rojak and Kearney Peter's grave, and the coffin is taken to the Capitol. The remains match what is in the official files, and Rojak angrily berates the professor who interrogated Jim. Despite this new circumstance, Rojak decides to press ahead and let Peter speak, even though he is sure that Peter will denounce him. Why else would the Americans go through all that trouble to make him believe something that wasn't true? He tells Kearney to bring Maria Malik and Jim to the event, who will no doubt be overjoyed that her son has returned. And then once they gain the crowd's support, Rojak will pull out the evidence that all of them are frauds. Well, it's time for the big event. Maria Malik is brought to Rojak's office to meet Peter, and she says that yes, it could indeed be her son. Paris at Peter says they'll talk later, and they go for the big speech at as the student world apparently looks on. Kearney introduces Peter as a returning hero to the country. Paris channels the spirit of Mark Antony from Julius Caesar, saying that he wants the world to bury the memory of Edward Malik, to the shock of all present. Madame Malik steps up and says that this is not her son. Her son is dead, and this is all a farce by Rojak. Roxy starts a "We Want Maria" chant as our heroes are taken out of the room, and Officer Willie tells the guards to go back in to protect the premier so that the IMF can drive away safely. The Student Congress completely turns against Rojak, who is thoroughly helpless and dejected. Mission accomplished. I'm going to give this episode a grade of a D. My first grade was to give it somewhere, my original thought was right at the border of C- and D+. But after thinking it through and looking at the good and not good, I had to bring it down. It's down to a D. Let me start off with what is good. Barney talking to Jim through the radio device is kind of cool. It's a little hokey, from a scientific perspective, but it's okay. Visually, it works. And frankly, it's the only thing that creates any bit of suspense in this episode, where things don't go completely as planned. Also good, but this is kind of a point-counterpoint thing. This is an episode where obviously it's kind of a pennies from heaven plot. The IMF are going up against an antagonist, and basically give the antagonist, a gift from up above, which turns out to be a complete Trojan horse. I liked the idea, as the good point, that Rojak shows at least a little bit of competence. For the first half of the episode, let's say, he's at least thinking it through and saying, boy, this could be a trap. I got to be careful. So he has to, he doesn't have to, but what he does is actually take some steps, not jump headlong into things, and actually think about whether he's being set up. That's actually good. But the counterpoint is it completely falls apart. It reminds me very much of things, the point that I made in episodes such as Robot or The Choice, in which the IMF uses a very similar kind of methodology, meaning, give the antagonist exactly what they want, and, he'll use, their idea, and then they'll turn the tables on the antagonist. And in very much the same way as those episodes, Rojak falls into the trap because of the whole evil cannot comprehend good sort of thing, right? Rojak is another one of those villains who thinks that everybody is out to get him, right? And, everybody has the same motives that I do, which is just to get or maintain my power. So he's always thinking, they're only doing it because, they're out to set me up. And the IMF can completely use that against him. So as a villain, Rorschach is completely lame. But not only that, but he schmuckifies himself completely. Even when the tables are turned on him. Kearney, and by the way, to complement his lameness, right? Even though he does go through part of the episode showing intelligence and being careful and being diligent and scrutinizing what he's being offered, right? He has this lame hothead, Kearney, as his second in command. That's not good. But then the tables get completely turned. Even after he finds out that, the whole thing is a setup. Then it turns completely around. Kearney, of all people, says, you know what? Why don't we just call the whole thing off? Right? That would have been the smart thing to do. Even though I announced, Peter Malik was found. Oh, well, we made a mistake. That would have been a hell of a lot less problematic than actually going through with it and looking like a complete idiot, which is what ends up happening. But not only that, Rorschach, who to this point has shown that level of intelligence, just doubles down on the plan. No, damn it, they're not going to they're not going to get the best of me. Even then, if he decides, you know what, we've already announced that this guy is Peter Malik, he could have allowed Paris to speak, say whatever, right? And then just proceed based on that. He had an ace up his sleeve. If you think about it, the IMF gave him a gift that he could have taken and used to his advantage. Here's what I mean. If he allowed Paris to speak at the Student Congress, one of two things is going to happen. One is, as he believes, Paris is going to denounce him because it's all a scam by the Americans and Peter is an American plant. Okay, well, you can just discredit Peter, right? And you can say, hey, we completely made a mistake. Here's late-breaking information. This guy's not Peter Malik. End of discussion. Done, done, done. But the other option is that, of course, Peter goes ahead and does what Paris does, which is to say, hey, what a great guy Rorschach is. Obvious, and maybe I have to kind of turn the way I'm looking at this around. The IMF also has their options open as well, depending on what Rorschach does. Right? My point is that Rorschach didn't have to drag Madame Malik out of the mental hospital and put her there too in an effort to discredit her. They didn't have to drag Jim and say, okay, I'm going to use this to take an opportunity to make, United States intelligence look bad. He could have just said, the best thing to do obviously would have been to call it off, but the second best thing to do would be to just let, Paris as Peter say whatever it is that he wants to say, right? In that case, the IMF, now that I think about it, I just realized this now as I'm recording this, is that the IMF also had an option. Let's say that for whatever reason, Rorschach didn't take the bait, and he didn't invite Madame Malik to the ceremony. To witness the speech, and Paris came out and said, and Paris could have, in that case, could have given a speech denouncing Rorschach, right? Instead of saying, "Hey, Rorschach's an awesome guy." That could have happened, and then I'm sure that the IMF would have had an alternative plan in that case. But I'm just talking about Rorschach here as the villain. He chooses the absolute worst alternative. And when there were simpler alternatives that were put right in front of him that could have completely avoided schmuckery completely. And in this case, he completely schmuckifies himself. Other things that are not good about this episode. This is another episode, as I've commented on some episodes in Season 4, where the IMF seems to have perfect knowledge. Everything goes rat-a-tat-tat. There's basically absolutely no risk in this mission. Down to the point where Barney knows which office this professor Rojak is going to use to try and question Jim. He knows exactly where it is. If he has that level of knowledge, my gosh, again, I question, what can't the IMF do? The only time where the mission even seems to be at a little bit of risk is during that sequence where, will Barney be able to get back to his cell in time? Will he be able to, get the guard out of the room so he can put the transmitter back together and continue talking to Jim? That's it. Even the use of the double agent vac lab, I think, is very, very underexplored. Even that could have been a little bit better. The final point, and I think this is the overriding flaw with this episode, is that this is one where the writers seem to want to be completely Anvilicious. They're trying to send a message, and the overarching theme of this episode obviously is, for the new generation to come and, reestablish the ideals of democracy, or, something like that. Right now, I wasn't there. This is before I was born. But, at this time, right at the end of the 60s, going into the 70s, my understanding, this is just my cursory understanding, I didn't live through it, obviously, is that there was this heavy emphasis on, the counterculture and distrust of the government, peace and love, and freedom, and all of that wonderful stuff. And somehow it's really, really, really pushed forward by the writers as the whole point of this hour of television. And when the writers want to emphasize a social issue, it's not bad to emphasize a social issue. But when they do it at the expense of the story, you're generally not going to have a good episode, right? If you feel that emphasizing that social issue is better, go nuts. That's fine. But I'm not going to give it a better grade because of that, because it just doesn't work here very well. A key thing that I thought of to kind of demonstrate that is there's no dossier scene, telling us about Dr. Valari or Roxy, who are part of the mission. There's a whole heck of a lot of, a lot of time spent showing, pictures of various, student gatherings and things like that, and protests and all of that sort of stuff. And of course, Roxy singing. That's what the authors and the writers and the producers wanted to push to the fore, rather than a cogent and coherent story. And I think it shows. I've mentioned this about other episodes, but I think it really is kind of evident here. Just as kind of a final look back, I don't remember exactly where I read it. Could have been an online review. But somebody said that the basic plot of this episode is kind of stolen from the Heir Apparent. From season 3, and okay, yeah, I can sort of buy that in a sense. At a very, very basic level, that is true. But like I've commented, I think with the previous episode, The Choice, which also has that sort of vibe, that's where the discussion should start and end, right? Yes, it has the same basic plot, but that's about it. Anyway, I think that's about all I have to say about this episode. We've come to the end of Season 4, and things are going to change. Season 5 is going to look and feel a whole heck of a lot different. We'll have a new regular female agent in Leslie Warren, who will be Dana Lambert. We'll also introduce a new character, Dr. Doug Robert, who will be played by Sam Elliott. And, other things are going to happen, which I guess we'll discuss as we go through this. That's about all I have to say. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate it as always. Please like this episode, or please like this review of this episode, rather. Please subscribe to my channel, and please leave your comments if you haven't already. Thank you again, and I'll see you again next time for Season 5.